Hello everyone. Today we're going to learn about the structures for the conditionals. I'm going to divide the sessions in different parts because here, in this moment, we're going to check about the first, second, and third conditional. However, there is another one which is called the zero conditional. We're going to start with the first, second, and third conditionals first. In the first type of conditional, I wrote an example here. It says, if I win the lottery, I will go to Europe. When we have these two sentences, each sentence is called clause. Where we find the word if, it is called the if clause. And the second sentence is the second clause. The if clause for the first type is in the simple present tense. And the second sentence, the second clause, is in simple future. So, if I say, if I win the lottery, if the subject I, the verb win, the complement, the lottery. And then we have a comma. The comma is very important between these two clauses, especially because when we start the sentence with the if clause, immediately before the second clause, we have to use the comma. So in this case, the comma plus subject will, subject I, the auxiliary will for the future, and the complement to Europe. I will go to Europe. This is the structure for the first type of conditionals. The second type is, if I won the lottery, I would go to Europe. Here we also have the if clause and the second clause. The if clause for the second type is in simple past. And the second clause is, we use the modal would and the verb in simple form. Here we have the if plus the subject plus the verb in past, the complement, the comma, and the second clause subject plus the modal would, the verb in simple form, and the complement. The most important thing here in the second type of conditional is that in English we use the simple past. But there is a problem when we translate this sentence into Spanish. And that is, if I translate literally in the way that we have the tense here, if I won the lottery, you would have to translate, si yo gané la lotería. However, that is not the proper Spanish. Why? Because in Spanish we would rather say, si yo ganara la lotería. But the point here is that in Spanish, si yo ganara is el modo subjuntivo del español. And this form doesn't exist in English. So the equivalent is the simple past. So you have to be very careful when you translate this sentence, into Spanish from the second type of conditionals. Okay? And here, because we have I would go to Europe, okay, that is the second clause. Now, for the third type, we use if I had won the lottery. In this case, it is the if clause and it is in past perfect. The if, the subject, the auxiliary had for the past perfect, the verb in past participle form, the complement, and before the second clause, we have the comma. I would have gone to Europe. Here we use would have for all the persons. It doesn't exist would has. It has to be would have for all the persons in the sentence. Would have plus the verb in past participle form. Here, what we have is the subject would have for all the persons, the verb in past participle form, and the complement. Now, a very important thing is that you must keep in mind that the different translations of each sentence in Spanish. That is, if I win the lottery, I will go to Europe. Si yo gano la lotería, iré a Europa. If I won the lottery, I would go to Europe. Si yo ganara la lotería, iría a Europa. And if I had won the lottery, I would have gone to Europe. Okay? Si yo hubiera ganado la lotería, habría ido a Europa. Those are the three types of conditionals. And now we're going to check the fourth type. The other type for conditionals is called the zero type. In the zero type, we have an example here. If you hit ice, it melts. The if clause is in simple present tense, but also the second clause is in simple present tense. Okay? We use the simple present tense in both clauses because when we use this zero type of conditional, we are referring to something that is always true, especially by nature, something logical that it will happen, of course. In this case, it is obvious. If you heat ice, si calientas el hielo, what will happen? It melts, se derrite. You see? So, if you heat ice, it melts. If, the subject, the verb, and the complement, that is the structure for the simple present tense, with the second clause that is also the subject, the verb, the complement in simple present tense. And don't forget the comma. The comma here is very important, and something that you must take into account is that in the first, second, third type or zero type of conditionals, whenever you start with the if clause, you have to use the comma. However, when you use the second type of conditionals at the beginning and the if clause at the end, then you don't use the comma. Now, in this case, as I'm telling you, it is something for sure. The situation is something by nature or something logical. In the example, if you drink a lot, you get drunk. Si tomas mucho, te emborracharás. That is something logical. That is for sure. That is for true. So, that is the use for the zero type of conditionals. Now, let's see what happens when we use the verb to be. In the first type, we can say, if I am a doctor, I will work in Los Angeles Hospital. Remember that the if clause in the first type is in simple present tense and the second clause is in simple future. In this case, if I am a doctor, I will work in Los Angeles Hospital. The second type is very important because when we use the verb to be, let's see what it happens here. If I were a doctor, I would work in Los Angeles Hospital. In this case, grammatically speaking, it is wrong when people say, if I was a doctor. That is informal language. The proper language is, if I were a doctor. Remember that the typical example in everyday language, people always tell others, if I were you, you see, that is the formal language. So here in this case, if I am a doctor changes to, if I were a doctor, I would work in Los Angeles Hospital. And in the third type, if I had been a doctor, I would have worked in Los Angeles Hospital. Remember the translation. Si soy doctor, si fuera un doctor, si hubiera sido un doctor. Those are the most important translations for these typical sentences. And this is what it happens when we use verb to be in the conditional sentences. Okay? Now, let's check something else. I mentioned at the beginning of this presentation that it is typical to see the if clause, for example, in the first type, and the second clause in simple present and simple future. However, it is possible to use modals instead of the simple future tense. For example, if I win the competition, I can go to the Olympic Games. Here, instead of saying I will go to the Olympic Games, I can use a modal. In this case, a modal verb, in this case, can. I can go to the Olympic Games. So, in the second type, it would be, if I won the competition, I could go to the Olympic Games. And in the third type, it is, if I had won the competition, I would have been able to go to the Olympic Games. So you see, we use the modals can, could, and be able to. This is what it happens. Yes, normally, it is not necessary to use the simple future tense, would plus the simple form of the verb, or would have plus past participle form of the verb. So we can also use the modals. All right? Okay. Now, finally, in order to understand the meaning in the use of each structure of the first, second, or third type of conditionals, I'm going to give you these examples. In the first type, when we say, if I study hard, I will pass the exam. That is Let's think that you are at the beginning of the semester and you are really willing to pass the exam and you wish to do everything so that you can have a great grade at the end of the semester. So you say, if I study hard, I will pass the exam. Now, in the second type, if I studied hard, I could pass the exam. This means that maybe in 1 or 2 weeks you will take an exam. Yes, but maybe there is a situation with you. In these 2 weeks, you also have 2 great parties, 2 great events with your friends, and you cannot miss them. So the point is that the problem is that you have to decide whether to study hard for the exam or go with your classmates to the party. Okay? So you say, if I studied hard, I would pass the exam. Now, in the third type, we finally see the decision that you took. And that is, if I had studied hard, I would have passed the exam. That is, you decided to go to the party, so you didn't study hard. And you are thinking that if you had studied hard, you would have passed the exam. You see the different forms, the different situations along the time when you use these structures. For example, in the first one it says, if I study hard, I will pass the exam. Si estudio mucho, pasaré el examen. Second type, if I studied hard, I would pass the exam. Si yo estudiara mucho, pasaría el examen. And the third type, if I had studied hard, I would have passed the exam. Si yo hubiera estudiado mucho, habría pasado el examen. Unfortunately, you didn't study, so you didn't pass the exam. That was the logical situation and consequence. Okay? So, I hope that with this example, you really understand now the use of each type of conditional. Okay? That is all in relation to the conditionals. Thank you very much.